I need a paper copy. I can't connect. Oh, okay. Really? I don't think the internet's working, but I pulled it up. It's okay. I got it. Thank you.
1 minute warning. 1 minute.
We're already against the flag, so
All right.
I'm gonna get one step ahead of you.
Hey.
NBC is out there to film something.
Where you are at the district.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to let you know that Sheriff Sickler did
Yes.
say he would be here at 6:30. So if we start the meeting, he should roll in any second if the council has any questions in regard to the proposed resolution.
Cool.
Oh,
Thank you. Perfect timing. The library here. Okay, at 6:30, we're going to bring the city council meeting for April 15, 2019 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Lennox,
Here?
Councilor Baker,
Here.
Councilor Westover,
Here.
Councilor Crawford,
Here.
Councilor Warren,
Here.
Councilor Vermillion,
Here.
Councilor Schneider.
Present.
Thank
All
you.
right, great. We have a quorum. About the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So there's no public presentations this evening, and we're going to go right to public comments. I saw that no one had signed in, but you want to check one more time? Okay. Anybody in the audience want to make any public comments?
I would
Okay.
like to.
Okay, come on up, state your name, and you have 3 minutes, name and address.
Sheila Pacala, Phoenix Counseling Center. Hi, everybody. All I wanted to say was thank you, Council Baker and the Chief of Police for the use of the building last week. And we raised money for the use of the building tomorrow night.
Nice.
And so I'm really hoping that we can continue doing that.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you for all of your support.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Is there anybody that wants to pull anything from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda passes unanimously. I'm going to make one quick change under new business. I'm going to move 8B up. Yes?
We have two public comments on both sides.
Okay. And okay. Ms. Simmons, our signs. And welcome Commissioner Bob Strasser also. County Commissioner Bob Strasser is with us this evening. Thanks for coming, Bob. So you have
Hi.
3 minutes. State your address, please.
Great, thank you. My name's Rihanna Sims. I live at 4283 Culver Road. This is my daughter Hazel, and I just wanted to share, since we had been here talking about the parks, I wanted you to have a sense of who visits your parks and enjoys them. And this is our skin in the game. I just wanted to share with each of you that since we've been talking about Phoenix Parks, that Talent recently celebrated their integrated pest management plan, and their public works director wrote a letter that I think was passed on to you by Sharon Schmidt, and he shared about the changes with their integrated pest management plan. Jacksonville also just had a study session about how their parks are being managed and had professionals just zoom in, so very little cost to the city, but Jacksonville just completed their study session. And Grants Pass and Cave Junction are both scheduling their study sessions to talk about integrated pest management in the next month. So you can see that a lot of the municipalities in Jackson County and Josephine are also talking about integrated pest management, how we manage our parks, and are looking into this. And also, since I've seen you last, that LA County in California, so LA County is a huge county, just banned the use of Roundup in all of their county. And so I really encourage the council to consider how we're managing our parks here in Phoenix and to see the examples that have gone before us in these other cities who are being successful. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Karich. Am I pronouncing that right?
No, my name's Carrick Gooden.
Karich, okay.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank you.
you're welcome.
This is my son, Rowan Eugene.
Okay.
Introduce myself, I live at 4283 Culver Road. My wife, Raina Sims. I have 3 children, 2 of them are present. And I just wanted to watch the last city council meeting, and the chair, or Councilman Snyder, encouraged us to think about ourselves as guests in your city, since we live outside your taxation district. As your guest, I just wanted to provide a reflection that you invited my wife onto your commission. You voted her on there. I know you're going to be making a vote later on today. I'm not wanting to weigh in on that, but did want to, as your neighbor, as I walk by your house, as the mayor, when we go to the park,
Yep.
and as I receive your newsletter in my mailbox. As your guest, I want to provide that. We were really excited that you invited my wife as a professional horticulturalist onto your commission to weigh in. She read the book. She reviewed that it encouraged you to do a study session. She said, let's do this. Let's talk about it. And then what ensued there was then you asked for her to leave. And so as your guest, I feel a little jerked around. And I just wanted to, provide you that reflection, and just want to see how moving forward we can get along as neighbors, and as we would like to bring our kids to the park. As somebody who's worked with youth professionally for 10 years, I have served as a DHS child welfare worker. When I bring kids to the park, we often see our kids lean against the trees. They sit at those tree wells. I was really excited to see there has not been recent spraying on those tree wells. Hope that could continue, just for their sake. There's alternatives. Study session, it's worth looking into. Other cities are doing it. There's cheaper alternatives. Thanks for considering that. Just want to say that
Okay.
much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
And Bob, you're on the sign-up list. Did you want to speak tonight, or just?
Only if needed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to switch things around a little bit. I want to move 8B up before 8A, and it regards resolution number 1034, resolution approving a Jackson County order to initiate formation of a Jackson County Law Enforcement Service District and consenting to the inclusion of the city territory within the boundaries of the district. And Nate, did you have a presentation that you want to give tonight?
That's up to the council. I have something prepared. I can give you a brief overview of what the project looks like. You also will be provided with this document, and so it's whatever the council would like. I can do answer questions, or I can give you a presentation. I just wanted to, whatever you guys need to help make a decision, I'm willing to do.
Can you spend a few minutes giving a very, very brief presentation and then open up to questions? Okay.
You guys all want to reference this for quickly?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to present this to you and for you to consider voting on this resolution. As you know, I presented several months ago about the overcrowding issue at our current facility. We've been working pretty diligently on coming up with a cost analysis, a feasibility study for a new project, and we're to that point now where we feel like we have some good data and some a good plan moving forward. So just a couple things I want to just refresh you real quick. We've had an overcrowding issue since 1985, essentially 4 years after this facility was opened. Grand jury reports have consistently said that we need to explore additional bed space or a new facility. This year, coming out in the 2018, I say this year, 2018 grand jury report, I think it just said that the county needs to invest in a new facility. However, that's expensive, and the county doesn't have enough money to do that just out of our reserves. Again, the design is labor intensive and it's cost prohibitive to run, meaning it's an expensive building to run, and I'll show you why. I had SOU do a cost of crime analysis. One of their economics students for their capstone project or senior project did this, and he found that Jackson County on average per capita was paying more per person than the rest of Oregon. So we have a bit higher cost per residence for crime than the rest of the state. And you can see that in the graph here. It's almost $200 more per person. And then he was able to find a correlation between released inmates and cost of crime. And we all know that. I think anecdotally we've experienced that with the fail to appears and the constant revolving door and rearresting and prosecuting and then victimization of individuals over, of our citizens and the residents who were being victimized by these people who weren't being held accountable. So, little historic, we purchased a piece of property in October, the county did, and during that time there was a due diligence period where we were able to do some analysis of the property, and we found everything to be suitable to build, from the zoning to no impediments such as, soil issues, there's no DEQ issues, there's no, protected species of flowers or rare, any other species that would cause us to do mitigation or anything like that. So the land is good. There are some small mitigation that can be done on the property, so it's going to really keep the cost down for the project. So in essence, all aspects were positive for the land analysis. And the county, we even went above and beyond to see if neighbors had been cited, for DEQ violations that would cause us issues later. Looked at traffic studies to see if we would run afoul of any traffic patterns or anything like that. And again, a lot of work went into making sure that this piece of property is suitable, and it turns out that it's going to serve us very well if the project continues. As you can see, there's a map of the proposed site there, and it's right next to Highway 62 and just south of Vilas Road. So to the north of the map, or the top of the map, is Vilas, and to the right is Highway 62. It's really very close to our current Sheriff's Office main facility, and so it's going to really probably help us with efficiencies in operations in those two buildings. So we're looking forward to that. So to come up with the cost and the design of this facility, we hired an architect firm, DLR, and they do this. This is what they kind of do for a living. They've designed other jails in Northwest. And so when we first met with them, we brought in all the stakeholders, starting with county officials, myself, community justice director, jail commander, and we talked about issues with our criminal justice system because of the lack of jail space. Then that expanded to the Public Safety Coordinating Council, where they went around and they asked everybody who was there in attendance what they would like to see in a new jail, without any budget constraints. So what do we need? Then we brought DLR in and had more, small group meetings. So we brought in police officers, correction deputies, mental health, addiction services, district attorneys, everybody that's part of the criminal justice system, has said, what do you need to see in a building to serve our community? And we did all this, and they came back with a $200 million price tag. So we said, okay, well, now we got to think of ways that we can value engineer some things, take some stuff out that might be the really ideal thing to have, but we might not need to have. So we went back to the drawing board and cut some things out, and now we're at $166 million total project cost estimated. $6.5 million has already been paid for through the land purchase. So we're at about $159 million left over that we need to build the jail. As we go forward, that's a huge number. Okay, I'm not saying that it's not, but it's really pales in comparison to the operation costs of the jail over 20 years. So we're going to need to get a 20-year bond. What we're asking the cities to do is basically pass a resolution after voting and considering this topic to enter into a service district that will support operations into the future and support the cost of a $100 million bond to build the facility. The county is prepared to contribute another $60 million out of the reserve funds for this project. So we go after a $100 million bond and then the operational costs. And as you can see, there's a potential design laid out over the land here. And you can see that it has housing units, which are HU. And within those housing units, we're going to be able to do the things that we want to do with treatment. So being mindful of some mental health services and addiction services within those facilities. Down there, one area where we made cut was, we said we wanted whatever we want, whatever you want in this facility. So we had a separate housing unit, 100 beds. So we would have had a 900-bed facility, but it was a treatment-based facility, and that was quite a bit additional cost to run and construct. So we decided, after evaluating the housing units and how they can be configured, and I'll show you that here, is that we could do those same things within the smaller footprint of the building, so we won't cut back on our services per se, just shrink the bed space a little bit.
Hey, Nate, while you're at it and talking about that subject, can you hit how the revolving door aspect of the current jail limits the amount of time people can be in jail in order to get services that you guys would be able to provide if you had a bigger, better jail?
Yeah, so, when people come into our jail, it's hard to give you an exact number. We have an average day in custody, and that's for all inmates. And when I presented to you, I think late last year, or early this year, 2017, we were at about 6.7 days in jail. And this year, so 2018, we're up to 8 days. We've made some improvements, added some bed space, and done some things to help alleviate some strain. But that doesn't include that includes our Measure 11 population, which spends like we were about 180 to 191 days. So offenders were coming in, and if they didn't have serious charges, so person crimes, if they were low-level property offenders, drug offenders, they would come in and they would be processed and pushed out because we didn't have room in our jail. And so what happens is with them not spending time, they don't have a chance to really maybe even sober up, or they're just getting to the point where they need to go out and kind of re-up or find drugs to keep from going into significant withdrawals. And generally speaking, not all cases, but many of these cases, individuals are committing crimes to feed their drug habits. And so the revolving door of the jail really doesn't do anybody any favors, because it really almost encourages that repetitive cycle of crime, instead of being able to get them sober, get them engaged with treatment services, and actually get them to a point where better decisions or decisions can be made with at least clear thought. And that's not occurring right now. Now we're trying to implement some things such as medical assisted treatment, but we're so limited on space that we're going to be able to do this with maybe 8 to 12 offenders max. And it has to be a very select group of offenders, because the only ones we can do it with are probation clients, because we don't hold sentenced inmates in there, but maybe 1 or 2 at a time, usually 1. So it's very challenging with our current facility to offer those programs, and they're very expensive. They're very expensive to run. We're trying to get an MAT program, and we're looking for grants to help us with that, and funding from like our CCOs, because you're looking at almost $1,000 is what market value is for some of this medication assisted treatment, and that's a monthly cost of about $1,000. So to do that is quite expensive. So this plan will help us fund some of those treatment options, as well as housing for these individuals, so they will be able to stay in long enough to get sober and to meet with counselors, and the people that are affected with their mental health issues will be able to see a mental health therapist and hopefully get stabilized and either moved on into the appropriate facility, whether that's a hospital or upstate, or they just get stabilized and they can meet with a outpatient care provider. So there are going to be a lot of benefits, I believe, for those who do suffer from those types of addictions or mental health issues. And then the benefit to the community is that they're not out victimizing our community. So we're kind of protecting the community and we're protecting the individual that's in our facility. And currently, we're not able to do that.
Thank you.
So if you look at this, where it says this space is very big, this map, this overlay, you see I think it's about 47 acres. And it has room to future build. And I know in 1981, when this jail was open, we were also told, there would be room, and so it's hard to predict the future, obviously. Very well intended when that jail was put up. I will tell you that we found some old paperwork from when that jail was built, and just recently. And the original design was to go up to 7 stories and hold 283 inmates, and right now we're holding 300. So we've exceeded the life of that facility, even if it would have gone up. And so, but this site being big and flat, you can see where it says FHU, those are future housing units, so the ability to plug in, and these can hold anywhere from 154 to 448 inmates apiece, depending on how you configure them, and I'll show you in these other schematics. If you flip to page 1, there's a space summary, jail space summary, top left, there's some writing, and then there's another design. This facility is very large, 214,000 square feet. Our current jail is about 77,000 square foot, so almost 3 times the size. The nice thing with that is because it is going to be very modern, our facility maintenance folks think that they can actually maintain this new building for about the same cost that they're maintaining the smaller building because of its age and how antiquated it is. So there won't be a huge increase in cost there. And then the staffing, we'll get to in a second, is very staff efficient too. So bed needs, how long will this proposed 800 bed facility is what we're looking at, 400 beds per housing unit, will last us? Well, DLR did a population estimate based on historical data and, future growth. And they estimate in 20 years that our population will be about 270,000 people. So quite a bit of growth. But certainly in a healthy criminal justice system, this should serve our community quite well. I mean, more than adequately. So I don't think we're going to outgrow this in the next 20 years, for sure. Again, I can't predict what crime rates will do, but right now we're so upside down. When we were first met with DLR, they actually said your criminal justice system is so out of balance because of the lack of jail space that we can't even tell you how many beds you would need. Because usually they can do a thing based on sentenced inmates, how long the sentences are, how many pretrial, all these things. And they said you can't even tell you. What I will say is when we added the 62 beds back in, so we opened up the basement in 2017 in April, at the end of April. In 2016, we had about 8,600 forced releases, risk releases. We're running about 230 beds. This last year, we're down about 5,400. So almost 3,000 that we've dropped in 2 years with just 60 beds. So we know that this is going to have a huge impact. Our goal is to get to 0 forced releases. Another thing to consider is best practice. So our current facility, we're running bed count at about 94% of our capacity, but our average daily population is about 340. That means about 340 people are cycling in and out of our jail daily. That's about 99% maxed out or 100%. And we need to be running about 80 to 85 for a healthy environment because of classifications and inmates being able to separate them, provide them with ample space. So this facility would do that. Now, if you look at these 2 squares that have a bunch of I guess they look like pieces of pie on them. They're cut out in quarters. These are the housing units, and you can see all the variations that you can have in this facility, and we can customize this to fit our criminal justice system here in Jackson County. So you can run anything from dorm type of housing to single bed cells. So you can classify inmates very appropriately. You can put the antisocial or ones who have violent tendencies, where they belong in their cells, and then you can house low misdemeanor offenders or those in treatment or whatnot in like dorm style housing. So very flexible. Obviously, once you build it, you don't have a lot of flexibility, but during the construction phase, we can really ferret this out and get the appropriate number of beds the way we want it. And we think 800 is going to serve us well with a target goal of about 700 inmates. And the reason we say 700 because of one is budget. We want to be mindful that, medical costs and food costs, the likelihood of fitting 800 inmates in an 800-bed jail is pretty slim. When we toured a facility that was very similar to this, their jail commander indicated to us and told us that when they had about 710 inmates, 700 inmates somewhere in there, they had people on the floors because of classification. So the goal would be never to go over 700, and then we'd float around 650 most of the time, except for in emergencies. And that would really give us the best operating environment for the jail, for our staff, for the inmates, and for safety. So that's important. But you can see that the way this is designed, the supervision of this, what you call the command center, or command and control, which is where the doors are operated, where the video cameras are, the screens to watch is all it's in the middle of this, and it looks down. So you can really efficiently monitor the entire jail from one position. Now, that's not how we would do it, but I'm just saying is you can see everything from this vantage point. And then, of course, you have your roaming deputies and things that walk in and actually do physical checks, but very staff efficient. When we look at the staffing model, so right now we have actually 80 FTEs going into this fiscal year, so we have 80 total full-time employees in our jail. To run this jail that has over double the beds and has 3 times the size almost, we only need 25 more staff. So it's very efficient for how big it is. And we will have better classification, we'll have more transport, all those things are included in the staffing model. So really when it comes down to like the day-to-day operations, it's really minimal compared to what we're running now. Now the other things, when I say transport and classification, those are important pieces. Those will increase as we increase inmates, but just the people on the tiers and working the things, the numbers are not much different than we run now, but the facility's 3 times the size, so very efficient. And really it kind of takes the argument out of running 2 facilities, like keep our current jail and then building like another smaller facility offsite, because your operational costs would probably exceed your building costs over a short time. And I'll show you a graph here. Staffing model, so we believe we're pretty comfortable with our staffing model. DLR did one as well, and they were on almost exactly the same numbers as we were. They were a little higher, but they were also including that treatment housing unit, which would have been, about 8 positions. So we feel pretty comfortable that our assessment was very close to DLR's, and they do this for other places and have built jails and designed them, so very competent. So the funding mechanism, we're asking for a service district of the entire county of 83.53 cents per thousand of assessed value. So what that does, what does that mean to the taxpayer? The average real market value of a home in Jackson County is about $270,765. The average taxable value of a home is about $187, or 69.4%, or 69.4 cents of real market value. So the annual taxpayer would feel about $156 a year in taxes, about $3.02 a week, or 43 cents a day. So really, although it sounds like a really big, cumbersome and big project, and it is, not to make it not what it is, but the assessed tax that we will all feel isn't that bad at the end of the day, when you break it down in this way, considering the value that we're going to get for increased public safety, and I think we're going to reduce a lot of livability issues in Jackson County. One thing that I think is important to note is that the county, as I said, is going to contribute over $66 million of the reserve funds that they currently have towards this project. So they're going to spend down to a level to where they feel comfortable they can still plan for emergencies or contingencies, but contribute as much to this project as possible. The other thing to be mindful is that the county is going to continue to contribute the same operating fund that we are contributing now, plus the increases that we would yearly. So this isn't going to take away from what our current allocation is to run the small, I'll call the small jail. So we would still contribute that funds. This would only add the additional operating costs and bond payment to the service district. So there's going to be no money made or hidden anywhere on the county side. When you look over at the projected jail costs, to give you an idea, we looked at debt service, which is if you have a color slide, I don't know if you have a color, but the small piece of the pie here is Debt service and operation cost is the big portion. As you can see for the 20 years is that the debt service is really about 20% of the overall cost of the jail when you consider the operational costs and the debt services. So it's a pretty, even though it's a huge number, $166 million to build a building, it's still a pretty minuscule cost compared to the overall scope of running a jail and building it together. There's some cost estimate sheets, some line items, so you can see where all the money's going for this project, and I won't go into each of these by themselves. You could read that at your leisure. But at the end of the day, you can see that the soft costs are about $33 million, and the hard costs, the actual construction cost, about $129 roughly. And that'll, obviously, we're not to a point where we've bid this job out. So we're hoping that we could obviously even do a bit better when we go, but this is based on fair market or construction costs right now, and what other places are paying per square foot for these types of facilities. We have the cost estimate, so you can see where the money is going on the jail estimate for 700 inmates. And at the end of 20 years, it's important to note that the county will have a positive cash flow of about $8,500 left over after 20 years. So not a real moneymaker for the county. And then when the debt service falls off, the service district will still be in place, obviously, because that'll go into eternity. There'll be a surplus of about $800,000 the first year. Now, based on our current operating cost increase for the sheriff's office, I'm sure that money will be eaten up in these operation costs. But if you can imagine that the debt service will go down each year as the bond is paid, but the operational costs go up. So really, we would need this 83 cents just to run this big jail in 20 years. So really, it's about as cost effective as that we could come up with and still get the building built and then operate it. Lastly, there's a construction schedule. If we go to ballot in November, which is our goal, to put it to the voters and let them decide, we would end construction and hopefully open the jail in like third quarter, fourth quarter of 2023.
It's not you're asking us to join the district. We're not going to vote on assessing a tax on our citizens. You're asking us to join the district.
Correct.
Our citizens to vote upon the proposal, right?
Yes, we would ask that you would vote on passing a resolution that would basically allow the city to be entered into the service district, which would incorporate the entire county. And at that point, it would go to ballot for all of the county residents to vote on whether or not they wanted to vote for this project.
Similar to what we do with a historical district or a library district.
Correct, sir.
Can you, I want clarity.
This is the service district, so it would be run by the county.
Correct, sir.
It would be county commissioners would be the board members of the service.
Correct.
So it's not like a special district.
Correct.
It's I'm sorry.
No, keep going. No, you're right.
But, and what's compression looking like?
We have no issues with compression right now, so all the cities there will be okay. If I remember correctly, there was maybe a couple of residents that were. I don't think there's any compression issues.
But just in theory, it is not us saying, hey, go ahead and tax our citizens. It's us saying allow our citizens to.
You're basically giving your citizens the opportunity to vote on this project themselves.
Exactly. Okay. Bob, did you want to add anything, Commissioner Strasser?
Well, I mean, like all of you, politically, this is a big project.
That's right.
And we didn't do this frivolously. The project comes about because we've known there's an issue with that jail for a lot of years. Timing has been difficult to do anything about it. In 06, 07, they made some temporary changes. I figured some of that would last a decade. We're past the decade. So we're bringing it forward for you to consider because we're charged with a job too. And that's to project out the needs of the county. It'll be up to the people to decide what they want to do.
Right.
In terms of the mechanism, The county wanted to make sure that in good faith, we continued to put in the money that we've been putting in, as well as make sure that this bonding, you know, $8,500 at the end of 20 years is not a grab for anybody's wallet. Not each city's, not anybody's. It is what we calculated was the best mechanism to do this with. So, having done our job as county commissioners, we put it forward to others to help with the decision.
And speaking just for myself, I appreciate the county stepping up with $60 million in funding, plus purchasing the land. That's a big contribution. I appreciate it.
First question people asked is, where is it going to go? So we have a site that is of decent size with at least 5 access points, that has no known contamination issues or anything else like that, that is close in proximity to where the current Sheriff's Department office is on Highway 62, south of it and below Vilas. So if there were any need for emergency response, it's close. And it was as good as we could find, and I think we did well in the acquisition of the property. So we've answered that question. We spent about 6.5 on that. That leaves another chunk that we're willing to use. And over time, the biggest cost is certainly not building of the facility. No, it's the staffing, operation, and maintenance of the facility. So we're planning for that with this funding mechanism so that we don't have any unfortunate situations like may have happened once or twice in the past.
Yep. Any questions of council, from council for the sheriff or commissioner?
Yeah, she was got her hand up first.
Okay.
I just have some technical questions first for our staff, and then I do have questions for both of you too, so thank you for being here tonight. So I have questions about what's in front of us and what's being proposed. It looks like the proposed, is it an ordinance that's in front of us, does more than open this issue up to put it on the ballot. It looks like it has language in it that's saying the city consents to the inclusion of a territory of an additional district. Is that, Doug, is that your read of what's in our packet here today? In the resolution, not an ordinance, I'm sorry. So maybe while you're looking into that, Doug, real quick, then just a couple of questions for you. So Sheriff Stickler, I mean, I always say Stickler, absolutely, accidentally, so so you came in a few months ago and you gave a presentation about the jail system here in Medford and how we compare to other counties across the state. And it looks like we have comparable bookings even to places like Eugene or Lane County, as it was noted in your presentation. I'm curious too, what other measures, if any, is the county looking at right now to divert low-level offenders out of the criminal justice system entirely? So we talked earlier, you had mentioned things like mental health and substance abuse. You know, I've seen from other communities that are having similar issues that Medford is facing. Are you familiar with the community court program that's operating now in Eugene?
No, not the community court.
Okay. So there's a program called a Community Justice Court operating in Eugene. They received a grant from the Bureau of Justice where they're diverting low-level offenders out of the criminal justice system entirely and connecting them instead to services, so addiction recovery services, social services, things of that nature. And they've successfully reduced recidivism among that population by 95%. So my question for you is, what are we doing as a county to divert drug offenders, property crime offenders, low-level offenders out of the criminal justice system to begin with?
Well, that would be more of the district attorney's decision on some of those things, but part of the problem that we have with low-level offenders is we don't even hold them long enough for them to get sober, as we described. So, for instance, if somebody is coming in for drug charges, then failing to appear at court, and then they're stealing people's items, property crimes on top of that, without holding them and letting them get at least interlinked or engaged with services, then they just keep offending and offending and offending. I've interviewed offenders who said that when they were using and out looking for drugs, they would commit 10 to 15 felonies a day. Those people, what you're saying, generally probably aren't, I don't know if they would be eligible for those types of programs because the victimization is so high. So getting them into jail isn't the same as keeping them in the criminal justice system. So there's a difference. Like there's prison and then there's jails. And jails offer the opportunity to stabilize an individual and then get them linked up with those services. Whereas, prison is where you spend long term. So they would stay in the criminal justice system. Just because somebody goes to jail doesn't mean that they have to spend a considerable amount of time in the justice system. My job is to keep the public safe. And right now, in our current system, by keep releasing people out, we're actually doing them a disservice because they're racking up charges to the point to where they don't have an option not to be involved in the criminal justice system, and we're creating victims within the community. So I think, to your question is, we do have mental health court, we have drug court, we have rock court, or drug court and rock court are the same. We have different diversion programs within the county. The community justice runs a lot of good alternatives to traditional custody, so just jail time. But the problem is offenders scoff at the system right now. They basically say, it's just a misdemeanor, I don't care about going into treatment, because you need to have a kind of this stick behind the carrot. So there are some good programs out there, and we are using resources such as community justice has created a resource center. So when we let inmates out of our jail in the morning, we try to hold them all night now, not push them out into the street. We take them down to the resource center, and they have services there. We have mental health services, we have addiction services, we have housing services, we have employment services, we have DHS, so they can get benefits, get signed back up, get emails. I mean, just really some resources to help them get on a better track. So we are doing those things. We're still in a point, though, that the jail is not serving the needs of the community, and not that we want to store people there for years on end, but we need to have enough time to get them appropriate linked up with services. So prison isn't an outcome, which is being engaged with the criminal justice system.
So,
Long and short of it is, there are some of the opportunity courts already here in existence.
Sure.
And the sheriff can correct me, but I believe when the Institute of Corrections, National Institute of Corrections came and they did some suggestions about things that we could do, they found out we were doing almost all of them.
So it sounds like the county then is potentially interested in having a conversation about expanding on those diversionary programs. I'd be very interested in continuing that conversation as a collaboration regionally here.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're open to all sorts of ideas, but when you say a lot of these individuals who are challenged with addictions, you say jail or services, right? And then they say, well, okay, if that's my choice, maybe services look a lot better. But we're dealing with a very challenged population at this point where they're fighting these addictions, and addictions are very powerful. So you got to have some of this motivation behind the opportunities. We're trying to create the opportunities, but we also need to create the consequence too.
Counselor, it's a great question, and one of the other issues in this is the inability to stabilize people and keep them long enough to get them straightened out just a tiny bit and then into treatment programs. The longer you defer that by releasing them so quickly, the harder it later becomes to get them rehabilitated.
But we do have inpatient rehabilitation programs in Southern Oregon.
We do. I believe, and again, I don't check in daily with our providers here locally, but there's generally a wait to get in, and then there's also the piece about where you might have ability to sanction treatment through criminal justice. So for instance, we have conditional discharge that we use very effectively in Jackson County, whereas if somebody had a drug charge, they could go in and say, go to treatment or face, conviction. So that would motivate individuals to go into treatment. And then their record would be cleared. And in essence, what you're talking about is not being engaged maybe long-term with the criminal justice system, just long enough to maybe get healthy.
Thank you. Commissioner Strasser, I just had another follow-up question for you. So the county, from its reserves, have chipped in, is it 60 million? Is that?
60 million is what we're additionally going to put in. We've already put in the money for the purchase of the land, which was $6.5 million.
Which is $6.5 million. And just out of curiosity, what is your total reserve budget as of now?
It's right around 100 million.
It's 100 million, okay. Okay, I think that was my.
We're obviously, we're nervous about taking 60 million with the increasing cost of PERS and everything else that we're all facing. But this is a substantial enough concern in this county, the impact long-term substantial enough that we're saying we'll step up and do that. You know, we're tasked with the responsibility of having a jail, and that means one cell basically, and we know that that's not realistic. So we're going out to the different communities and saying, what do you want to do? Here's what we found, here's the problem that's defined, here's what we see is our best information on what we need, and rest with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes, you're looking at not an ordinance, but a resolution, so there's a difference there. What the resolution's saying is that the district would have authority to build a jail and to construct, operate the facility. And what they're doing here, all you're required to do now is just agree to allow the city to be included within the district, because in order for them to be able to tax, they have to have a district from which to tax from. So now what that amount comes from, or whether it's kind of a two-part question really for every citizen. You might want to be in a district, and sometimes they won't vote for the tax, but in this case, you would be voting for to be included within that district, and then the district would then have control over the jail. And the jail being part of the justice system, not necessarily providing some of the other items you're talking about, some of the services, but they'd be providing the jail service. And
So it wouldn't create a new board that governs the district, it would be the county that governs?
a service district is different than a special district. A special district, you end up with a group of citizens that are voted independently of the commissioners and create that. So there's a number of different types of water districts out there, library districts, and so on. This is a service district. So a service district is really a part of the county's board of commissioners are the board members of that. So they're looking at not only their own budgets, but they're also looking at the county budget. So they do kind of play some dual roles there. So it's nuanced, but there is a distinction between an entirely different independent body making decisions as to how much they're going to tax or how little they're going to tax. They don't have to tax the entire amount, at least I don't think so in a special district. They can decide, well, we're only going to tax this percentage amount or this many mills or whatever it was. But that's going to be a function of a county commissioner making that decision in the future. I don't know that Bob will be around that long to be making those kinds of decisions.
It's not getting there.
Mr. Commissioner.
Thank you.
You okay?
Thank you.
Councilor Snyder.
Just a couple of quick questions. I just want to make sure that I know the mechanism we're working with here. All the cities that pass these resolutions will now be a part of the district until you vote. They vote until decide if they're going to get the money for it. Is it the maximum? Is it the majority of the people within the district that are determining it, or is each city independently, when the individuals vote, voting themselves in or out? For example, if we joined, but our citizens only went 20% saying they wanted to fund it, we are still in the district? Or are we
Yeah,
out?
it would be a majority vote of the entire county. That's the way I understand it.
Now, I would like to check that, because I'm thinking that once you decide here, then it's whether or not I don't think they count the votes within each city.
No, it'd just be
It's whether or not
countywide.
the ballot passes, and if the ballot passes, even though you may have a majority of your group in your city that didn't want it, you folks have agreed to be a part of the district, so.
That's right.
You would be part of the district.
Oh.
Correct.
That's your understanding too, right?
Yeah.
Can we re-clarify that? So I just want to be 100% sure that we know what we're talking about. So you're saying that if this goes to the ballot, if we say, yes, we want to put this to the people, and then Phoenix votes no, but everywhere else votes yes, we're still a part of that district, and even though Phoenix voted no, we still have to pay for it?
If it came back and the county clerk were adding all of the numbers up and they found that City of Phoenix even despite the fact that you passed this resolution to be included in a district, the city of Phoenix citizens voted no against it for the most part. You would still, city of Phoenix would still be part of the district because this resolution that you're passing here says that you're giving them authority to create a district within your area.
Thank you for the clarity.
So the upcoming vote in November, nothing to do with whether we are in the district or not in the district. What we're doing tonight will determine whether we're in the district or not in the district.
That's correct.
It has really nothing to do with the vote itself.
That's right. You're not passing, by passing this, you're not now creating a district. The voters have to vote, but you are saying whether or not you are within the district or
And if
not.
a city like, say, Jacksonville decided not to be in the district, they wouldn't be included in the vote, they wouldn't be included in the tax either, period.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, the dynamics would change everything because it's tabulated on the entire district being countywide. So, for instance, if Medford pulled out and said, we don't want to be in the district, you'd have to figure out how to get the same amount of money to operate the jail minus that huge population base or property base. So it would shove everybody else's rates up and it would not be feasible,
Right.
in essence.
Well, let me just finish with Counselor Snyder, and then I'm going to come to Aaron. Do you have more questions?
Well, I have a couple more points.
Okay.
I just want to make sure. On the FTE that you propose, is that assuming that you have the optimal structure for the jail to have the least number of people watching the most number of inmates?
Correct. So this model, the way it's designed and the way that you can supervise it, that's about as efficient as that we could run that big of a facility and be safe and get all the tasks done.
Okay. Just one more thing. I want to make sure what we have in the resolution is technically correct. If you go to page 27 of our pamphlet and look at line C as in Charlie, it has a 3-digit amount for the 100 or assessed value per thousand. On page 25, we have a 4-digit, and now that 4-digit appears over in your funding mechanisms briefing slide. I thought we had determined that it was only a 3-digit, but is it actually a 4-digit?
It should be a 4-digit.
So let me have Aaron hit that.
Right, because that's really a question for staff, because it's the resolution and not. It is a 4-digit number, and it should include that 3 on the end. So if you do pass the resolution tonight, that would be changed. You would have to know in passing this that it's .8353.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't have disconnected. What we're doing here. That's all. Thank you.
And Aaron, did you have anything else to add?
That's what I was going to ask.
Okay, great, thank you. Go ahead. Anybody else in council have questions?
I do.
Okay.
I'm just wondering what further, besides what we're dealing with here, what further implications could that have being part of the law enforcement service district? Just the tax itself, is there other things that would go along with that?
Not that I know of. This is for a tax to fund jail operations and the construction of a new facility, and that is all.
Okay.
So there wouldn't be anything else associated with it.
Okay, also if, say, Jacksonville doesn't join, we do, and then it passes by a majority, is there a stopgap? Which would just be the voters knowing what they're voting on before it happens, right?
So what would happen is if, let's just say we went through these processes and several cities, yourself included, said yes, and then we got to Jacksonville or Ashland or wherever, and they said no. So we would have to stop, and we would have to redraw the district, and then we'd have to come back to you again because it would have changed the rates and a bunch of other things. So you would have the opportunity to say, no, we're not interested at this point. And I think the commissioners would also have to decide at that point if they wanted to even push it forward to the cities with the rate change. So we're pretty mindful of where we started at $1.09. We did a survey back in March of 2018, and it was not wildly popular at $1.09. So I can assume if we got back up into that $1.09 that we could expect the same result with maybe a little bit more public education that we've done. A few more people would be favorable, but I think that's a big push. And if we lost a city, it's likely that the rates would move up, and then that would make this not a feasible project. But if somebody went out, we'd have to represent.
Okay,
So you would get a chance to say no then.
okay, thank you.
Is there any questions? I have a question. You want to go? Thanks for coming.
I have a question about a part of this process that appeals to me a lot. I just want to make sure that I understand it correctly. And I don't know if anybody knows or not, but I'm currently going through the Sheriff's Citizens Academy. After Sheriff Sickler came and saw us last time, I saw this coming. And not only that, I've had my bike stolen and it made me mad and stuff. And it's like, I feel like as council, we've got some decisions to make and I wanted to make informed ones. And with regards to the jail, I did go on a ride along and I found this to be really fascinating. I actually went with a graduate from Phoenix High School, Go Pirates.
Go Pirates.
And wow, it was so amazing. Many different aspects, but I'll tie it down to what we're talking about tonight. First of all, I was really surprised. We were in White City, and I was really surprised about the compassion that the deputy had for the people he talks to. We would slow down, and he'd wave at kids in the cul-de-sacs, and it was his beat, so to speak, and he was really had a good rapport with these people. And a lot of the people, we would drive by people, and he would know them from past experience. And but he never said anything bad about them, really. And so my point is that I really have learned, one thing I've really learned is the Sheriff's Department has a real heart for the people they're serving, both the victims of the crimes and the addicts of the crimes, or that are committing the crimes. What I was also surprised about was we had this will be germane to my question because it's one part of this that's key for me, it's pivotal to my wife too. We had 2 apprehensions. One, and the deputy knew both of them from the past. And the first one was really low key. It was just, he had a warrant out, like we're talking about. And we took him, I was just there, right? The second guy was a whole different program. The second guy was really high on drugs. I mean, growing up, I went to some parties, but nothing like this. This guy was really, really high on drugs, and in a bad way, and was really abusive toward the officer. He did not come easily, and even when the guy was kicking the inside of the car and calling him all kinds of racial names, the deputy was totally in control and trying to kind of talk him through it. So what happened was I actually got to go inside the jail. It was fascinating in that control room that he's talking about in the center. That's where I had to wait because I'm just like a regular guy, right? But it was fascinating. It had all these screens, and there was a deputy that's there, and they open and close all the doors, right? And they were totally cool to talk to me. It took a long time because the guy was, like I said, really out there. But that was where I really learned the most. Where I learned the most was from the conversations amongst the deputies themselves, because they know all these people in these different screens. And I watched, it was like, so they bring them in through this one area, and this is where they're in really bad shape. But if you watch over on these other screens, you've actually got them trying to be productive. They're helping in the jail. They're cleaning, they're folding, they're doing things. And then there's the other end. And I was talking later with my new friend, and I said, I don't get it. I said, you know these people, you know them, and you try to help them. At what point don't they pull themselves out of that cycle of going from being really, really addicted to the drugs, because they have the programs available. They're available. If you want to go get clean, you can go get clean. And he said what was happening was, and you correct me because there's an aspect of this. They get arrested for whatever reason. They get put in jail. Now, they're kept there long enough not to be a harm to themselves or anybody else, but at that point, if they're a low-level person, even though they were very dangerous 12 hours ago, they'll get kicked. And so they leave that place, and instead of going to a better place, they go home. And they go home, and there's their brother or their cousin or their buddy, and they're doing the same old thing. And as bad as that person might have been hating the car ride down, he's just going to fall right back into a trap. It's a trap. And my question is, it's my thought that if you could get them into some sort of rehab or something going before you release them, and I think I saw that on the map. Is that what you're talking about? How much of that's going to go on, really? I mean, are you going to have a chance to work with these people before you release them so at least they hit the ground running?
Yeah, so the goal will be is, right now we have a couple different things. One is the chronic FTA program. We started that at the beginning of 2018 because of the huge influx of failed to appears we had. We were able to drop our FTAs by almost 3,500 by holding these individuals in jail for about 20 days, 15 days.
FTA is?
Failed to appear in court. Essentially, they were thumbing their nose, all of the offenders were thumbing their nose at the lack of jail space. So, we issued like 13,000 warrants, I might have told you this, 10,000 of them were for failed to appear in 2017. So it really just said, we don't need to go to court, we don't need to do anything. If we can hold individuals in, there'll be opportunities for bail still, individuals have that right to make bail. And then there'll be first appearance in court, that's the key. So if a judge determines, that this individual can benefit from help, if a judge says let him out, then we have to do that. But we'll be able to offer services within our jail that we don't currently have. Like, we want to start a medication-assisted treatment program right now. We don't have the funding, so we're working on getting funding. We're going to be able to run it at a small scale, maybe 8 to 12 total beds, and it's a very select population that we'll be able to work with. In a new jail, we'd be able to run that at a much bigger rate, maybe 30 or 40 beds where we're running MAT programs, and they're wildly successful. I mean, they talk about dropping recidivism rates, by almost 70% when you can infuse medication in with treatment and then send people out, because it is just really effective. So we want to do that now, but the problem is we can't hold people, we don't hold sentenced inmates, and what you're talking about is maybe with sentenced inmates. So if a judge says you're going to get 30 days for your property crime, that's when you really start to have the opportunities to work with them. So the first point is to get them sober, in the jail, get them through the withdrawals, and then get them to court, and then figure out what they're going to do, how they're going to do, are they pleading guilty, are they going to fight the case, or whatever they're going to do, and the judge makes the determination. But we will be able to get these things started, and for sentenced inmates and probation clients that are violating their probation, we should be able to have full programs within the jail.
So that was kind of the crux of my question is, if you could hold them longer, would it be easier to get them already started on some sort of a helping program?
We have community justice, and they actually have rehabilitation programs, addiction services out at community justice. So right now, we would probably strengthen that handoff. We would be better serving the individuals that are moving to community justice better, because they would have more time in a lockdown facility. Community justice is not a lockdown facility. And then they could transition. And so we're talking to the Housing Authority too about trying to form some sort of partnership for even transitions beyond, but we're talking years down the road because projects take that long to get going. But yeah, we have the plans, and our medical costs, we're estimating to be pretty expensive to include the mental health and the addiction services.
Won't that also reduce the cost of having to pick them back up next week?
That's kind of
what I'm looking at is, how can we end the cycle?
Yeah, you got to hold them, and then you got to get them treatment.
Yeah.
I know of a few cases where there's options available to them, but because there's no they're not worried about being held. Like they would, if they were a little more scared of being locked up for a few more days,
Sure.
They would show up for their treatment, but they're not scared because they're not going to be held, so they keep pushing it off. Even though there's help available to them, they're not taking it. They are going back and using it one more time because there's not enough deterrent to do that.
Correct.
Carrot and the stick, right?
Yes, yeah.
There's no incentive, and I want to go back to the National Institute of Corrections and the best practices in modern jail facilities. And this has all been run through the Public Safety Coordinating Committee, where you've got your judges, your DAs, your public defenders, your practitioners, mental health, addiction. They recognize that the inability to stabilize people before you turn them out is detrimental. And once again, what I was talking about before, the more you do that, the harder it becomes down the road to stabilize people. So you're creating and building in your own problem.
To the fact that prison is maybe more of a likely outcome because they've racked up so many charges on these sprees.
Well, let's, just for a minute, can I address one more thing with you?
Yes, sir.
When you talk about prisons, now that's a whole different arena, but the trap with prisons is people get released.
Oh, I didn't mean prisons. I meant just regular.
I know,
These
but
guys get let out and then they wind up.
Follow this logic. The trap there is they're released, and in many places they just hit the streets. they're free. Here, we can transition them, provide them housing, try and find jobs for them, and give them a way back into society in a productive way.
That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm looking for.
Councilor Crawford.
I have a question.
Yes,
So
sir.
right now, what's our average stay per inmate?
In 2018, we were up to 8 days.
8 days? And with the new facility, do you have an average what that might be?
Well, we're targeting, I think best practices are 14 to 21 days. So we would certainly try to get there. I can't give you an exact number right now. I think that would be foolish of me to do. But as long as we can hold them legally and best practice is what we'll strive for. So we'll still have opportunities for risk release. Judges will have opportunities to release individuals who have bail. But what we don't want to do is push people out before they can go see a judge on their initial appearance. And then those that the judge determines are not able to comply with the rules. So the judges will make decisions on how long people stay, not us per se. Right now, we're making the decisions on who stays and goes because we're full. What I want to do is give that back to the court system and let the judges do that through, release officers or through their own assessments. And if the judge determines they need to be held because they're suffering from addictions or, fail to appear or other things, then we'd be able to honor those holds.
And you'll get that with the larger facility?
Yeah, well, we'll double our capacity now, over double it. We'll go to 650 actual beds, where we could swell up to 700. And truthfully, we could even go a little above that, but we're going to budget at 700 for meals and medical and stuff like that. So in an emergency, obviously, we could swell up a little bit more. But like I said, with classification and other issues, it's not likely that you could sustain operations at over 700 for a long period of time.
Thank you.
Let's have one more question for the panel, and then we'll deliberate amongst ourselves.
I don't have any questions.
Anybody else have a? Okay. Well, thank you very much for the presentation. We're going to deliberate now amongst ourselves.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. So I'll open up the council discussion regarding the resolution.
So one of the things, what we actually have in front of us, right, this is a broader conversation that we've been having regarding community justice and jails and addiction and all of these things. It's a much broader conversation than what we actually have in front of us. And what we have in front of us is committing the people of Phoenix to be a part of a district. And I think, I'm not prepared to do that. I think we need more input if that's gonna happen. I think that because here's the scenario that could end up happening. One, the bigger cities are gonna determine how this all pans out anyway. If this goes to Medford next week and they say, we don't wanna be a part of the district, then there won't be a district. But two, let's say it goes the other way. Let's say, yes, we are committing the people of Phoenix to be a part of a taxing district that is a 20-year taxing district for $160 million, is that correct?
Yeah, 100 million.
100 million? Nope, $166 million.
They put up the 66
Oh,
million.
because the county, you're right, thank you. So if we do that, and the other cities decide, yes, we want to be part of the taxing district as well, and then it goes to a vote. And everybody, or some folks vote yes, but let's say the people of Phoenix vote no, they're still part of that, the district, whether or not they voted yes on it. So tonight, without hearing from more people from the city of Phoenix, without having some of that input, I'm not prepared to commit them to being part of a taxing district, especially when we have big needs coming up here at the city level too. We have a police department that is unbuilt. We have a commitment, and we haven't even talked to voters about going out for any additional funds for that. So it makes me a little bit hesitant to commit the citizens of Phoenix to being part of a taxing district when they don't know the way the vote's going to play out, especially when we have other really big funding priorities that are a part of this council's strategic plan.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I had a question for the chief, but he seems to have stepped out for a minute. I don't know if our city manager can answer it. If we do not join the district, but the district is created, so now we're outside of it, and our city police have arrest, where do they take the person? What do they do with that person?
I don't know the answer, do you?
No, it sounds like if any one city opts out of the district, then the commissioners are gonna have to redraw the district lines, so that would change things.
But it wouldn't stop, I mean, if you were arrested, if you were
Arrested here in Phoenix, if you weren't in the district, you would still be taken to the jail. I mean, it's not like you're going to, so the problem is you're gonna have all, you know, a bunch of free riders. And so that's what the county would have to deal with, whether or not they want to have, you know, go through this whole process if all the small cities decide to cut out, but it would be inherently unfair to everyone else in the community.
There are other districts like Rogue Valley Transportation District, which we are in, and I'm sure we'd all support the RVTD, I think most of us would. So I would support zoning the district. I think the county definitely needs a new jail. I don't want to see Phoenix not be in the district. But Sir Wessel makes a good point. If Medford drops out, or another bigger city like Central Point or Ashland, this is probably not going to go anywhere. If it's a smaller city like Phoenix, maybe Jacksonville, they may still continue. One thing I did want to add was I talked to Aaron earlier about council goals supported. One of the council goals supported, I feel that is in this, is a priority goal that's in our strategic plan is to provide safe, accessible, family-friendly parks. If you look at the Parks Master Plan, all the input surveys that went into that, you'll see lots and lots and lots of comments of concern about the safety on the Greenway. And I think this would help alleviate that particular problem on the Greenway to some extent. Like Terry was saying, there won't be so much of a revolving door. People get a chance to go through a process of detoxing and getting on the right path. So I'm actually for the district, or entering the district, giving our voters a chance to vote on it.
What really appeals to me is getting treatment started before release. It really appeals. I've lost friends to this stuff, and I couldn't help them. And I'm for it. I think also, as much as we don't want to force them into a district, we don't want to force them out either. At least forcing them into a district gives them a vote. If we force them out of a vote, we're saying, no, you don't get a chance to vote on treatment. You don't get a chance to vote on what I truly believe would make for safer streets for our kids, you know, and the truth of it is that if the people want it, they can vote for it. If they don't want it, they don't have to vote for it. It's going to be a big issue. And that's just where I'm at.
The council want to comment on it before we have a motion?
I know that crime, of course, is a big hemorrhaging problem, and what's it going to be like in a year? What's it going to be like in 10 years? Something needs to be done. I don't know if this is the right way, and I know that Phoenix needs police department redone, but I'm apt to vote yes on this one too.
Can I make one last recommendation?
Let me just go around the table some more. I know you had your say, and Angie chipped in, and Baker, and any of the councilors want to chip in.
So I agree with what Sarah says too about, you know, we do need our Phoenix Police Department, but I also agree with, I believe there's a bigger picture with, you know, investing or helping out with Jackson County, our Sheriff's Department. I think that the big picture is not just now, it's what's going to happen in the future. And I'm leaning towards, you know, our citizens, you know, elected us to make these decisions. And yes, I would like to have maybe some kind of a forum where they can express themselves. I think that would be an opportunity for them to talk. But I also am leaning towards support for the Jackson County Jail.
Any of the council want to chip in before we go to Aaron? I'll come back to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I really hear what Sarah's saying, and we're committing a good amount of money from our taxpayers, you know, potentially. How much of an issue would it be for us to delay this decision and have a town hall on it? I'm just throwing that idea out there.
If you're asking staff, I mean, we can put something, you know, announce something as soon as you want them.
The proposed order from the county shows June 26th as being their date for their time that they have to make a decision. So, you know, I'm sure that it'll put them on their edge of their seats as they're waiting for everybody to do that, but you would have to, you know, get the process going.
Before I go to Aaron, any other council?
I was just wondering, do we have a head count, a city head count yet of how many have passed resolutions and how many are in the status that we're in right now? Has anybody passed one? Has anybody passed one of these resolutions, any of the cities, or are we in the same position as all the other cities, having not done anything?
I think we're the first, right? Yeah.
See.
Thank you. And that's there.
Yeah, just the last piece, one recommendation I would make that is something that we could do. One, like I said earlier, the bigger cities are gonna make the decision on this, right? So Ashland is looking at this tonight. I don't know when it's gonna come in front of like Medford or others, but they'll make their decision. So one thing that we could do is defer the decision so that we could actually get some more citizen input on committing them to being potentially part of a $100 million 20-year taxing district, and wait to see what the larger cities decide, because at that point, you know, if Medford and Ashland are out, then it's probably not going to happen. So that's one thing that we could do. I also just want to add to this conversation, because we've been talking about, which I think goes a little outside of the scope, but since we're on talking about it, we've been talking about keeping people in the system longer so that they don't reoffend or so that they get clean. And one thing that we know is that you can't necessarily force people to get clean. And that's why we have really good outpatient treatment programs in Southern Oregon. We do have holding tanks and things like that outside of the jails. I heard some comments about things like, you know, potentially using jails as like a holding place for houseless people. And I think that if we want to get to the root problems, right? So some of the root problems that we want to address by having this conversation is that we don't want as many people in jail. We want people to have access to drug treatment. We want people to commit less crime, right? Those are some of the goals. And I think that means we also, if we're having this conversation about a jail, then we also need to have a real conversation as a community about investing in basic programs that help people stay off the streets, keep clean, and, you know, once they are clean, to stay clean. And some of those things include housing, so affordable housing. We know that, Terry, you brought it up an example earlier, when people go out, they go back to their homes. Sometimes that's the only place they can go. They meet up with the same old people, right? So when we make sure that people have access and opportunity for affordable housing, we make it so that they have access to have a stable place to live, to get clean. Another thing, you know, we have a lot of houseless folks in our community. Instead of putting them in jail, we should build affordable housing, look at tiny homes, look at different kinds of models for that. We should invest in transitional housing. So those are things that they do in Medford, where they have transitional housing for folks who are getting clean and sober to live, like the DADS program at On Track. So we should invest in those kind of programs. We should invest in healthcare as a community, as a broader society. We should invest in education. And I don't think, you know, if we want to have this conversation about limiting crime and limiting the impacts of crime and lowering our jail populations, we also need to be prepared to have those very real conversations about housing and about supporting mental and addiction recovery support in our community. So I hope that we'll be open to those conversations as well.
Aaron, you had something you want to add. You want to add it, or if we covered it?
No, I think it's something that, it was something that was already brought up.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that before anybody made a motion that they noted an amendment to the resolution to change that permanent tax rate.
Okay, thank you.
E353.
You know, as during the campaign, I knocked down lots of houses. And I hear things as mayor, walking around the city talking to people, and a lot of it regards crime. I think our number one duty as a city council is to keep people safe. I hear about the breaking over at Blue Heron Park, and someone stole all the tools that was in the shed at Blue Heron Park that the club over there uses to manage the gardens. The cemetery got broken into. They had all their stuff wiped out of the shack there, and there's a few things left over, and somebody came by and stole the rest of it a few days later. Someone that just moved here and they lived on Rose Street, and a couple days earlier, they just moved in, they had 2 bikes and a tent stolen from the back of their house. There's an apartment complex right down the road here, just across from La Tapatia, and one gentleman that lives there, he told me about the fact that someone had come in and broken in through all these little storage units in the parking facility. Someone came in, raided all those items, and the same gentleman told me this, his wife's car got stolen. So they got a rental car. Someone came and drilled a hole in the gas tank in the rental car and stole the gas. If we don't put people into the system and allow them to get treatment, our standard, our living here, our culture is going to keep eroding. It's going to get worse and worse every single year. Like Sheriff Stickler said, someone gets out of jail, they go out and they start committing more crimes, felonies and misdemeanors. It's a vicious cycle. And I appreciate what Councilor Westover is saying regarding treatment and housing, and that's all for the good. But if they're getting out of jail and they're robbing our citizens blind over and over and over again, that's the problem that we have to solve. That's the #1 problem. And if they're in the system, they can get a lot of treatment that Sir Westover is mentioning. I talked to one gal, she's homeless by choice, and she got out of jail, and she was in there for a little while, and she came out of jail and she said, I have a better opportunity now because I'm in jail to get housing. They put her on some kind of list to get more housing because she was in jail. They do provide a lot of services that we're seeking for citizens, and to me, we just got to nip the problem in the bud, and that problem is having people stay in jail for a long enough time to the services that the sheriff and the commissioner spoke of. That's my 2 cents worth.
I'll make a motion if I can.
What's that?
I'll make a motion if I can. I propose to approve Resolution 1034, approving a Jackson County order to initiate a formation of Jackson County Law Enforcement Service District and consenting to the inclusion of city territory within the boundaries of the district.
Second. Terry?
I needed to add what?
Noting that amendment in, under C.
Noting amendment under C.
For a permanent tax, property tax rate limit of 0.8353 per 1,000.
Property tax limit of 0.853.
We had a second, but. Second. Yep, Terry made a second. More discussion?
Just want to say one last thing, but I think that we should really check in with the folks of Phoenix before committing them to being part of a big taxing district.
Okay, we'll have a vote if this passes. Okay, roll call, please.
Okay. Councilor Westover?
No.
Councilor Vermillion?
Yes.
Councilor Baker?
Yes.
Councilor Hopper?
No.
Councilor Snyder?
Yes.
Councilor Warren?
No.
Well, I really get a chance.
Aye.
I really get a chance to vote on this one here. I feel very strongly. I'm going to vote yes. The motion passes 4-3. Thank you. Next up is a discussion of the possibility of renting out the Civic Center at no cost to people. We had a person come in last meeting asking to rent the facilities at no cost, and we decided to bring it back for city council discussion. Aaron and I have discussed this a little bit, but Aaron, did you want to talk on behalf of staff regarding your thoughts on renting it out for free or making exceptions to the rule?
Well, I think that whatever policy or procedure that we have can't be arbitrary. It has to be very specific. One of the things that we're still kind of developing or finding out is what the true cost to run the Civic Center is. And it appears after the first, I guess it's 6 months or so that we've had the Civic Center available for rentals, is that we're probably not recouping all of the cost. And so any decision that the council makes, you should know that we don't generate enough revenue to cover the expenditures right now, so that will have an additional negative impact on that.
Thank you. Council input?
I don't think we should be renting it out for, giving it away for free also. If there's an exception, a rare exception, and staff wants to bring it to city council for whatever reason, you bring it to city council, but I think our policy should always be for groups or individuals to pay the appropriate fee, and make it very rare where we make an exception. If that were to happen, the staff has the authority, of course, to come to council, and council has the authority to waive something, but I think it should be an exceptional event. Anybody else?
Just in general. Every time I hear the word an exception to,
Yes.
an exception to the rule, my skin crawls. And the reason it does that is because if you make a rule, you follow it. If you have to create an exception to the rule, it means the rule itself is flawed, and you really need to go back and rethink what the rule should be. So I'm not putting anybody down when they say an exception, but I'm saying that the basis on which we're deciding is flawed if somebody thinks that. So I think what we're trying to do at one point is discuss whether or not the initial rule that we made up way back before we opened the center, that there wouldn't be any free giveaways, is either correct or it's flawed. And if it's flawed, we need to change that policy. But we need to change it in a systematic way so it's fair to everybody who is in those categories. You know, a category could be limited to nonprofits and community people who are only within the boundaries of the city. Okay, that would be just an example. But so I don't think you want to do something that says nonprofits for the entire valley, if you want to go that far. But I think the fundamental question is whether or not the initial rule that we made was valid for the underlying assumptions, which was, as he pointed out, to self-sustain the organization. So the real question is, we have one data point right now that has a certain opportunity cost lost to it by not collecting money for using it, but also has a cost to us to maintain, which is a real cost to us because after the event, if they pay, we would do it. We're going to do it if they don't pay. So we have two different kinds of opportunity costs and expense costs here, multiplied by the number of events per unit time, which could be a calendar year, makes sense, times however many types of organizations might come in under whatever our rule is. And that kind of gives you a feel for how much money you're not going to bring in while the facility is being used. Fundamental question is, do you want the facility to be used no matter what? You know, just free or paid, doesn't matter. Or if it matters to pay, then you need to understand the cost of doing business by saying freebie to this. But you can't just, I don't think it's good to pick a data point and say that that particular organization gets it for free. All organizations in that category, and other categories we might come up with, and we need to factor that out and do it in a logical sense. Don't have any numbers to know how much that is. The staff would have to, figure out numbers for us, the consequences of those behaviors, how far behind are we putting. But, if one organization comes in and says, I'd like to do things for free, the word will get out, there'll be a second, there'll be a third, there'll be somebody from outside the city coming in. So we have to set our boundaries, and that means we have to set the rules properly so we don't have to give exceptions. So that's just kind of the philosophical point of where I was at with this.
Thank you.
I'm not going one way or the other on this particular thing.
Can you remind me how much we're charging per hour? It's a sliding scale?
No, it's not a sliding scale.
Great.
Nonprofit is $25 an hour, whether it's weekday or weekends. And then a private event, I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I can look at the food line. I believe it's $4 an hour on weekdays, and then I can't remember what it is on the weekends. And then we have commercial, which is never used. I mean, we haven't had any yet. But I can tell you that there's more to it.
Thanks, Chief.
So private, for half the room is $35 an hour, and a full room is $50. For commercial, it's $50 an hour and $75 for the full room. And then the weekend rates, for private, it's $50 an So the city didn't have to cover the cost, Raven and I came in and did. And, so it's just, there's a lot to take into consideration than just waiving the fees. We're trying to determine how to cover the cleaning costs for some of these events as well.
Thank you.
So to continue on that question, we don't charge a whole lot in the first place.
Right.
So, I mean, we're not like, you know, waiving a big fee or anything. So, you know, my intuition here is to say no, you know, no free event. Sorry.
It's like Jim said, we stick with the original rule, and I think that's a good suggestion. Councilor Westover?
Yeah, it's just a tough one too. I'm gonna give like the context because it's a public building. We want it to be used, right?
Right.
But we also have to offset our costs. Otherwise, the other option would be, and I'm not saying we should do this, but we could put an operations budget into a future budget, right? That covers all of the costs. That says, you know what, we're not gonna collect fees, we're just gonna let this space be used, but we'd have to incorporate that into our city budget. I'm not saying we should do it, I'm just saying that would be the option. Or, you know, to be realistic about the staff time that goes into this space and the cleaning and all of that, we do have to collect some fees. We also have to take into consideration that we're losing our AmeriCorps member, and that has been a really important part of staffing this space. So I hope that when we talk about our budget this year, we'll be accounting for that. Because our staff, you know, Kimberlyn has a busy job. She shouldn't be in here cleaning the Civic Center after events. You have more to do than clean up confetti and glitter.
Glitter didn't, not our policy anymore.
No more
Yeah.
glitter, no glitter.
Ever.
So I agree for now. I think we, just in the essence of fairness, I agree with you, Jim, we should just keep the fees the way they are.
Yeah.
So I think I'm hearing kind of a consensus. Anyone disagree with keeping?
No, I agree.
Keeping it the way
where
it
it's
is?
at. We're priced reasonably. It's a public building, is why it's priced that way.
Anybody disagree with keeping it the way it is?
I got one more question.
Sure.
So our community grant program could we apply, or could community members apply for that grant to use towards applying to this facility? Just a thought.
It's a good idea.
Does that qualify? Because at least then we already have this money set aside for these kind of things, right? So then there's a system that they go through, and we've already set the money there.
Good idea.
And then that money can just be filtered into.
Yeah.
If I can-
Anyone can apply, right?
One of the things is that the community grant has an open and close period.
Right.
So it would limit, we would either have to change the process for that to have it, you know, year-long, or we would probably be very limited in the people that would apply for that grant for that space because it's got a short period, you know, open period. But, you know, that's an option.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing either, because it requires them to.
I guess one of the things I would say to that, though, is ultimately, the same group would be coming before the council to get approval. It's almost the same thing as asking to have the fee waived. It's asking, you know, the same group is gonna come before you and say, well, can I have that amount of money? Well, what would be the difference in that group coming and saying, will you waive the fee?
The difference is that there's a process that they need to go through and that there's equity in that, as opposed to just having people come to us and be like, hey, will you waive fees? And then we make that decision on an ad hoc basis. If they apply for a grant, then we can say, hey, you met the criteria that we have.
And the accounting would be different too, because there'd still be, you know, the building would still be paid for its usage, right? It would just come out as a grant that we're creating, you know, for community.
It'll be a one-time event versus having it rented every single time through a grant. I guess they could apply twice a year, right?
Yeah.
Does that take more staff time than what the grant would normally do?
Potentially, and then again, you just have to keep in mind that there's that cleaning where we're going to actually send money out to a vendor who's going to clean it, and that potentially could be a lot of money for the city over time, so.
I think the grants are usually a max of 1,000. And if I recall correctly, this most recent one, which was free to them because of donations, was $100 in costs for rental and for the cleanup. Was that?
I made a deal with her that if she cleaned it up, I wasn't gonna take the money from Chief. So we did it that way this one time, and then unfortunately, it was assumed that we were gonna continue doing that, so when they rented it, they didn't pay for the cleaning fee again, so now we're back at the same place that we were.
Okay, well, I'm trying to do some math here. So it was 50 to rent and then 50 to plus 100? That's what it would have been, right?
I believe so. I want to say Braylon mentioned something about the fee being $75 this time without the cleaning. I could be wrong, but it's somewhere around there.
Okay, what I'm trying to do is backward integrate out of the 1,000 maximum, how much it costs per event to get to the number of events. And they were actually asking to use it on a regular basis, which was many more times than that number would give. So I agree that the grant could be a possibility, even at the maximum level, though I don't think it serves their purposes. It serves a portion of it, but not all of it. So just be aware of that.
What is the opening and closing window? Sorry.
It's opening at the end of May, and you guys will be awarding it the second meeting in July in the new fiscal year.
The great thing about that grant program is it could go above and beyond room rentals. It could go to creating promotional materials and snacks and things like that. So it's a really good resource. We have a $10,000 pool that we allow folks to apply for if they meet certain criteria. And it's a really good community resource that's been underutilized.
If you don't mind, I will just want to remind you guys that we're trying to put the YMCA program in here Monday through Thursday. And so the building really wouldn't be available because we're going to be doing rec programs. And that just leaves us with Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays in order to recoup costs.
And I appreciate all the discussion, but we're gonna go back to the main point at hand. The point is, do we stick by our original rule, or do we change from the original rule? And from what I'm hearing from council, there's a consensus, but does anyone not want to stick with the original rule? Okay, so I hear consensus that we're gonna stick with the original rule. If there's anybody that wants to speak out differently, let me know, or otherwise we're gonna close discussion and stick with the original rule. We good?
Yep.
Okay, thanks, guys. The next item up on the agenda is an ordinance, and it is a second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 1001, an ordinance of the City of Phoenix to establish a Parks and Recreation Committee in Chapter 2.13 of the Municipal Code. This is going to entail a public hearing. I want to hear from staff first, if staff wants to add anything before we open the public hearing and have some discussion.
One thing I noticed, just one, well, actually two spelling, a couple things. Looking at what page it is, it was on, let's see, you're on the very end here.
32 in the packet.
Is it 32 in the packet? Thank you. I'm at 24. Okay, there we are. Okay. On page 20, sorry. Excuse me, sorry about that. On page 34, section 7, you write down there, like about the third line up, it says an election will be held at the begging of the first meeting.
Okay.
Begging.
Beginning.
I've never been to a meeting.
All right, then, so you're begging me to get this thing over with, I'm sure. Section 12, on the next page, page 35. I don't know if it makes much difference, but right there in the middle, it says, develop internal rules enshrined. You could say adopted. Enshrined seems kind of, I don't know, it's archaic word.
That was my word, it's my favorite word.
Oh, is that right? Okay, well then I would say adopted.
Excuse me, am I changing that or keeping it?
It doesn't matter, I just, I'm thinking if you want to.
Let's go with adopted.
We'll go with
Adopted? Okay, all right.
Anybody not want to go with adopted?
Yeah,
We're good.
okay, and then the final, section 13, in these, right in the middle, that second sentence, it says, these internally agreed up bylaws, I'm assuming it says agreed upon bylaws shall be presented. Short of that, I have nothing more.
Okay. I missed this.
That's right.
I've read it once too many times.
Well, I'm going to open up the public hearing with regards to the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 1001, an ordinance of the City of Phoenix to establish the Parks and Recreation Committee in Chapter 2.13 of the Municipal Code. So the hearing is open. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the ordinance? Anybody wishing to speak against the ordinance? Come on up. State your name and address, okay?
So, my name's Julie McFadden, and I'm at 512 South Rose Street. So, I actually attended a Parks and Rec meeting because I was thinking it might be an opportunity for me to participate in my new community. I moved in September, a new homeowner here. I was excited about moving to Phoenix, and again, I just thought it would be a great way to kind of get to know folks and get engaged. When I attended the meeting, what I noticed, though, is that there was one person who was really well organized and really trying to move an agenda forward, and then there just seemed to be a lot of confusion about Robert's rules, a lot of bickering, and then there was this kind of sense of an inside-outside kind of an agenda that was a personality thing, and quite frankly, I looked at it and said, I don't think I want to be part of this commission. And it was because of that. I actually thought the ideas that were being brought forward, which at the time were just about can we look at whether or not we can reduce the amount of pesticides in our park, was a great public safety issue. I thought, well, this is fantastic. Yes, let's look at it. Let's at least see. Is it feasible? Is it something we can or cannot do? Is it something that's affordable, or blackberry is an obstacle? But at least let's look at the information. And the amount of resistance that came up to just investigating it was discouraging to me. I stopped paying attention because I work and getting my home ready and everything like that. It's been a pretty busy time, and but then I found out that actually this ordinance came forward and would make it so that the person who was bringing that forward who lives outside city limits couldn't actually participate. What I saw was a commission that wasn't actually fully staffed. So it's a volunteer position to start with, and we didn't have enough volunteers from within the city limits to fulfill the positions. And I was grateful that we actually had somebody who didn't live in the city limits who was willing to do that. As a taxpayer, I was okay with the proposals. I would be okay with having somebody who lives outside the city limits make some suggestions that I would be paying for. And my values were represented by her. So that's my concern tonight. I also thought maybe it sets a dangerous precedence that if we just disagree with somebody, we actually vote them out of a commission. And I think to me, and that's just the perception that I was getting from this. I think that to me, having different ideas is a part of what is going to give us the best ideas. I used to work in Salem, in the Capitol, and different ideas is actually what gets you the best policies. And so I really would love to see us keep that and actually make them work it out. Let's actually have those brisk discussions and those different ideas, and let's actually see what happens, because I think we can bring about better results through the diversity for Phoenix. So I just wanted to take some time. I'm on my way home from work tonight and got to go grab dinner, but I did want to say thank you for the time and just at least have one voice heard.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else want to speak with regards to the ordinance? That said, I'm going to close the public hearing. I did want to mention that all people are okay with participating and giving testimony at the commissions, committees, and also here at the city council. Okay, let's have some discussion with council.
So since I wasn't here in the last meeting, I'm just going to chime in. Since I've been involved with the Parks and Rec Commission for the last 2 years now, we struggled with attendance or with people to be involved in it whatsoever, and I think that limiting the number of people is a huge mistake, and I don't think we should pass this as is. I think we should allow people who are outside the city limits, or anyone who really wants to be involved with it, to be involved with it. And I think restricting ourselves is just going to hurt the process.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I know attending the League of Oregon Cities training and the last training that was here at the Civic Center, they talked about making sure equity went across the board, that all of those, I know the business owner downtown here that said, I want to serve, I want to do something. She owns a business, she doesn't live in Phoenix. But she said, where's my spot, where can I serve on the budget committee, as she pays a large amount of street tax on county and city. And so I think it muddies the water on where, if it's not equitable across the board for somebody else outside to serve on any of the other committees, and other cities don't do it, Grants Pass, Central Point, Medford Ashland, none of them allow someone outside the city to serve, and so it follows that equity across the board for all committees and commissions, I think.
Anybody else?
I'll just reiterate what I said last time. I think that, you know, I hear the concerns around equity and being across the board. I think that there's also a reason that we hadn't for years, being that there could be one person or two people outside of city limits. I also think that we have a lot of discretion as a council, so that if somebody lives a block outside of city limits and their kids go to Phoenix schools and they pay into our school districts and their kids are in the park, that there's a reason that they should have a say. And I just want us to be mindful of disenfranchising volunteers when we have so very few of them.
And I just want to respond to your point, Councilor Vermillion. You listed a bunch of larger cities that have more people to draw from for volunteers, when we're quite a bit smaller. And Talent does actually allow people from outside the city.
I think Talent's the exception to the rule. The rest, yeah, small, the same. So.
I've been here 10 years, I've been doing this, we have never had that problem before. And I think we're okay passing it the way it is, but it's my 2 cents worth. But with that said, we'll need any more discussion?
I'm not opposed to having somebody outside of city limits, just maybe not have a vote. Is that possible? Still have volunteer, but just not have a vote?
I think that might open up another, like all of the committees and commissions then would have to have a written in position for liaison, like it would have to go across the board, and maybe could get really messy in having those all be equitable across the board with that.
I lost that argument last time.
The reason you have members is to create a quorum so you can have a meeting. And the members of the quorum are there to vote. So if you have somebody who is a member but can't vote, they shouldn't count toward the quorum probably. And therefore, their voting is superfluous. Their inability to vote is superfluous. They can give the same content of their ideas by being a witness or presenter at the meeting. But sitting up on the dais, so to speak, but not being allowed to vote, doesn't do anything that they can't do from the audience. Plus, if they can't vote, they can't go to a quorum. And if you can't get a quorum, you can't have a meeting. So you need a full-fledged voting membership to be able to create the quorum.
And I can assure that if someone is very committed to a particular agenda, they're going to show up at the meetings and express their viewpoints. And they're going to put in testimony, they're going to ask for certain things of the Parks Commission or Planning or Budget Committee. They're not excluded. They're more than welcome to come and participate.
They may feel a little discouraged. That's the only thing. So, I mean, when we start limiting these kind of things, you know, I think we're publicly saying we're not really fighting your input. So.
I don't know about that. I mean, you're inviting their input, but I can't vote. I mean, I listen to everybody that comes up. You know, I listen closely to every single one of them, and I take notes and I'm paying attention. And in the end, we vote, right? But I was talking about what you were talking about last time, Councilor Crawford, and then Jim made some really good points about the quorum and the voting, and I had to kind of admit it, if you will. I did, and now I am of the mind that, you know, you should be a city resident to be able to vote. But I do welcome neighboring community members. I do. I want to hear their voice, but to actually cast votes,
I'll just say it, I feel like you should have to live in the city. That's what I think.
Are we ready for motion?
The motion, we're gonna make a motion as to note the 3 changes that our attorney made.
Is it possible for me to ask a question?
There isn't at this point, but I appreciate you. Come back next time and ask a question, or we can meet afterwards if you want. Okay. Somebody's gonna make a motion, guys.
I make a motion to approve the second reading of the ordinance for the public hearing of ordinance number 1001 to City of Phoenix to establish a Parks and Recreation Committee in chapters 2.13 of the municipal code with the changes mentioned by the attorney.
Thank you. Is there a second?
No, sir.
Any more discussion? Roll call, please.
Counselor Warren?
No.
Counselor Crawford?
Yes.
Counselor Westover?
No.
Counselor Vermillion?
Yes.
Counselor Baker?
Yes.
And Counselor Snyder?
Yes.
Okay, the
Thank
motion
you.
passes. Thank you very much. So we're up to city attorney and city manager reports. What do you guys got?
Did we skip the banner and the,
That was part of the consent agenda. So we did approve for the city to pay for the banner
did I just
for the Chamber of Commerce. And it's part of it, yeah. And just to clarify, there's already money set aside for the Chamber of Commerce. We're gonna tap into that, already set aside money, but it's already approved.
Sorry.
Good question. Okay. City attorney or city manager report?
I was in the Pear Blossom Parade, I didn't see anyone hanging around. Yeah, I was with Southern Oregon Historical Society, it was kind of fun. Yeah.
And I would just, I would like to let the council know that Matthias, our lead utility worker, is in the audience tonight, and I want to say thank you to him and his crew for all the work they've been doing here at the Civic Center and at Bioswale specifically. Glad to see you in the audience, and if any of the council hasn't met Matthias, most of you probably have. He runs a pretty tight ship, and so he and I are in close contact since late last week when Ray left. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to Matthias and his team.
Thank you.
We're lucky to have him. He's a hardworking, dedicated, caring type of guy. He's great to have him on board.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, other than that, I have nothing else to report.
Okay, thank you. I'll go around the table.
I don't have anything.
Councilor Snyder.
Just a question, because my memory is a little foggy. We recently got, I think all of us did, an email from our head BC person asking for staffing. I know you gave a discussion of this in the past, but I don't remember what you said about why we're not providing it. Can you remind me?
For a couple of reasons. It's not provided for in the ordinances that establish the committees or commissions, except in very limited ways, and also due to staffing not being available. We've typically had meetings in the evenings and asked staff to attend those meetings, although it wasn't in the ordinance to provide it, and we've had to pay overtime for that or provide comp time. So when we do provide staff, it's at time and a half. Now, some of the committees and commissions have changed the hours of when they want to operate, and we were waiting for the ordinance on Parks and Recreation Committee. For one thing, they'll create their own bylaws, but we would hope that they would operate, you know, at times that work best for them, but that doesn't always mean that it's at times it's best for staff. The email that you referenced, or at least one of those, noted several hours it took to put the minutes together, I think it was. Well, those several hours didn't also include the time that the meeting took place, which was another 2.5 hours. So I think that was a total of 6.5 hours, plus travel time for staff, which the person that was attending those meetings is in public works, so we've got maybe 15 minutes there and back. So we've got 7 hours of staff time for that one meeting. If we go off of the hours that were in that email, there are additional committees and commissions that would also require that same, amount of, would require staff time. So we're looking at, a dedicated employee that has a 40-hour work week, and at any given one of those weeks, they might be spending 10 hours outside of their normal job duties. So it's something that it wasn't budgeted in personnel costs originally. It wasn't provided for in the original ordinances that created those committees and commissions, and we were trying to make it work, whereas we had to look at staff time and how we want to best use those people, and whether or not the volunteers that are committing to those committees should be responsible for those things as were outlined in the original ordinance. So, I mean, that's a long-winded answer, but basically it wasn't provided for.
Is that something you're thinking about putting into the next budget cycle, or is that not part of that yet?
I think if we wanted to do that, we would want to look at each one of the ordinances for committees and commissions and see if we want to have that as a specific item that the city provides. Now, and it's a much bigger discussion, but when we're talking about volunteers, are we talking about volunteers to support city function, or are we talking about city staff to support maybe a committee or commission that has an outside kind of an interest? And that's a completely different conversation and much bigger than what we're talking about here. But if that's something that the council wants to consider, that's certainly something we can do. But we just passed an ordinance creating Parks and Rec Committee, and we didn't add that, I guess you could say.
And would that have to be across the board for every committee then, that we would want to put staff in to make it
If you wanted it to be
equitable across?
consistent, I think each committee and commission would expect the same treatment, if you will.
Which could get expensive.
And the same amount of support, staff support.
There's only 3 commissions, committees: planning, budget committee, and park and building. Planning always has the planner, and so the planner there, PCD also, I guess, and budget committee has the staff and a budget leader, typically the finance director or the city manager.
Right, and some of those committees and commissions might have meetings during normal business hours, and the council might also attend those, like the budget committee. So it would make sense for especially the finance director and the city manager to be included in those meetings. And we're salaried staff, and we would be expected to provide information to that type of committee. So that committee, as an example, it makes a lot more sense for staff to attend those meetings.
Okay. My other thing was, I'm glad I stopped by to see you for a minute the other day, and it reminded me about the due out for tomorrow for your evaluation. So we all owe evaluations to HR tomorrow. Okay, that's it.
And today's deadline, today's the last day to submit your ethics information to the state.
Yeah. You were part of
I do. Is it this week, Aaron, that you're working 2 more days than you had hoped to have working? You were going to take a week off, and then you had to come in for 2 more days. I thank you for your work you do. I think that's great, and you do it with a smile on your face even. Well, maybe. Thank you for that. Phoenix Chamber is doing great. It left in really not in a good situation when they took over, and they have worked so hard. The people that are on that, the chamber members, they're being very wise with finances, and they're growing greatly. I think they're going to do good things. So I'm pretty impressed with what's going on there as they're rebuilding out of ashes, I think. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
Councilor Westover.
I was asked to participate on the budget committee again for the RVMPO. I don't think I'm going to have time to do it this year. I've done it for 2 years in a row. I think you have to be a member of the policy committee, I'm not sure. But so, just so everybody knows, I'm probably gonna tell them no. Yeah, got a lot going on, busy. I think that's it.
Okay, great. You know what, Senator Jeff Merkley's office called me up and asked me to MC a meeting. It's a town hall meeting. It's gonna be on the 28th of this month at the high school. So 28th this month, 1 o'clock, the high school. Senator Merkley's holding a town hall meeting. And yours truly was asked to MC, so I will MC the event. And that's all I had. Anything else, guys?
What time is that at?
It's at 1 o'clock on the 28th at the high school, the town hall meeting. Okay. Right. That said, we're going to adjourn the meeting at 8:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.